I'm dead. God damn it. I'm done with Crypt.
Hey, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here. Well, it's a long story, and we kind of have to go back to the beginning for it to make sense. It all started many moons ago. Crypt the NecroDancer is a roguelike rhythm game that had dance pads in mind when designing the game. Hey, I have one of those! Crypt is home to hard hats, hard-hitting soundtracks, and one of the hardest 100%s in the world, with only a double-digit number of people having earned it. It's taken people thousands of hours to not even fully 100% it, and to add to this, I don't think anyone's actually earned all of this game's 61 achievements with a dance pad, and so I set out to see how far I could get in Crypt's daunting achievements before losing my sanity. I started off having a very strange time with the default controls, as certain buttons weren't getting properly overwritten in the game's menu, and so I had to whip out anti-micro. Up, down, left, and right were as expected, and top left was to use items, while top right was to throw a weapon if it were throwable, bottom left was pause, and bottom right was confirmation button if I hold it down for 0.1 seconds. But the game's actual controls are also important. Pressing down and left at the same time plants a bomb if the player has one. Certain characters also have this, as well as other spells and other actions that are tied to other combinations of up left, left right, up down. It all depends on the character picked, but the default controls are most commonly used across the characters. This game has a ton of nuances and micro details that when you first look at this game, either seem so trivial and pointless, or they're so numerous that it's disconcerting, and either of these outcomes creates an experience that I think turns people off from playing any further, explaining why the most earned achievement has only been acquired by 44.7% of players on Steam. So this video is not going to be just about how many achievements I got and how I got there, but also in the order that I think new players should go hunting for them. That being said, don't focus solely on the achievements that are on screen right now unless you've somehow made it to the final stretch of achievements and you need that sound effect to feel alive. These will be earned by random chance over time. The tutorial syncs the player's sound and video, and it teaches the player basics about how some weapons and enemies work, but also showcases something that I highly suggest the player change to their comfort level. Each major interaction causes screen shake. You can turn that off. The floor lights alternate to the beat when the player has a coin multiplier. This can be changed to a softer shade or just turned off in general. And the heart at the bottom of the screen beats to the beat, but the bars also come together to clap. You can choose to have one, the other, both, or neither. I removed the heart because it blocks where the bars touch and can cause a missed beat if you're following it visually. In Crypt, everything goes to the beat of the music. Not moving to the beat will drop your multiplier, which affects coin drops as well as the values of the blue-colored obsidian items. Each of the 5 zones has 3 floors and a mini-boss guarding the staircase down. After the 3 floors, there's a zone boss. Each level has a different song and BPM to get used to, and if the stage's music ends, the player is dropped to the next floor. But if the mini-boss hasn't been killed yet, the player will be put into a small room with some enemies as well as the mini-boss, and they can't leave until the walls are broken or that boss is killed. Characters and more lobby rooms also get unlocked in these solitary zone runs, requiring a key that can either be purchased or found in a hidden room. Oh, speaking of hidden rooms, if a tile off in the distance has something below it like this, that's a traversable room. There can be traps, there can be a potion room, there can be loot, there can be bats. There were bats.
Oh my god.
From the get-go, I took forever to realize that the order of operations is player attack, player movement, enemy movement. If the player's next move is towards an enemy with a viable weapon, an attack will occur. If there's no enemy, then the player will move and then enemies will move afterwards. But if the enemy is going to move to where the player now is, the player will take damage. This means that if I can hit the stairs on the next turn, I won't take damage as my movement takes priority and staircases give damage immunity. I didn't catch this in my first 100 hours and I died clearing out staircase rooms more times than I'd like to admit. Looking at the lobby, new players should use these solo zones to acquaint themselves with the music, tile layouts, and once you unlock these side rooms, make use of them to practice against specific enemies or bosses that give you trouble. I used these rooms to practice movements on certain bosses and mini-bosses to find out where I could sneak in some damage. And finally, players should get a feel for the type of weapons they enjoy the playstyle of. This is a scary new world and mistakes will be made. Some items are useful to specific playstyles or characters, while other items are incredibly useful to everyone. New me is an idiot, and I passed over things like the backpack, which lets players hold on to one extra consumable. The golden backpack lets the player hold on to all the consumables. I also frequently passed on the pickaxe, which digs up any wall except gold walls, and I've got no idea why you'd ever pass it up. Working through the 5 zones, the 3rd zone was probably the hardest for me to overcome. The exit location is the least predictable, and it throws a large number of new enemy types and hazards at the player. As an example, firehounds are the first traditional enemy to move omnidirectionally, elementals are the first to move every odd number of beats, and fire and ice beetles turn zone tiles into a hazardous nightmare, so having whips, tridents, or other ranged weapons make them extra spicy if I choose to not skip beats. But probably the most important thing I took away from all of this is that I need to get into the habit of creeping into rooms. In zones 1 and 2, the enemies aren't plentiful, and so I typically enter in guns a-blazing. But every room in zone 3 is a potential mini-boss room. And what I should have done was stand still at the start of a floor and let enemies approach me. If nothing appeared to be making its way after a couple of beats, I should have then picked a direction and crept forward. If any enemies are seen, then it's time to prioritize. I learned to focus on anything that moves every beat, such as the knights, shove monsters, and the banshee mini-boss. Goblins also move every turn if you're not looking at them, but you can abuse this by moving away and then skipping beats until they're within attack range. And from there, rinse and repeat. And honestly, as long as the slimes aren't bouncing in a main pathway, I typically left them alone, and you should too. This way, the coals or ice that they drop won't affect you in the case of a retreat, unless you need a tiny bit of gold. I feel like every slime should be ignored from now until the end of time. You'll thank me later. Some characters have their own bosses to match the game's story, and because Zone 5 is DLC, Cadence's bosses happen at the end of Zone 4. That's right, your very first character has 2 final bosses. Deadringer and this version of the NecroDancer are thankfully Cadence specific. Most other characters don't have unique bosses, so you don't need to worry too much about them. It took me 229 deaths, but I finally clear all 5 zones with Cadence for my first 5 achievements. What a workout, but also, what a game.
Okay, now one more. That was a mulligan.
At this point, all zones have been seen, and there is a lot to go over again. From a purely dance pad standpoint, I started off incredibly stiff. When you first start playing Dance Dance Revolution, the tutorial tells you to keep coming back to center. Move out to an arrow, then come back to center. But as you get into more advanced songs, you learn that you can actually step on the arrows and keep your foot there without causing error. This kind of fluidity can be applied to Crypt, and while I don't fully apply it, I do become less rigid as I get into the game and the music. This game's learning curve is kinda like this. We're okay. Don't feel the need to perfect everything at once. There are a lot of training wheels. If you can remember even one thing per run, it all becomes muscle memory after a while. For instance, I forgot I had alternatives to moving and attacking. Eventually, if I got a spell, I'd try to use it once per floor just so I could remember it exists. When I got hit, I'd ask out loud, "Do I have food?" Calling it out helped me never forget it. Usually. All those deaths introduced me to almost all item types, so I have a rudimentary understanding of likes and dislikes playing on a dance pad. Armor reduces the damage enemies do, and my preferred order is what's on screen. I'm going to be dropping beats and get hit, so I avoid glass items as they break if the player takes damage. And obsidian armor, well, new players are going to be dropping beats constantly, but a more skilled player is not going to be getting hit as often until later levels, at which point they'll already have gear, so obsidian armor kind of felt out of place. For weapons, I liked sideswipers like the whips, flails, and broadsword initially, but I began to favor ranged weapons as these gave me extra time to safely react to bunches of enemies. And although I do enjoy the concept of the crossbow and blunderbuss, my feet and the reload button were never in a good spot to comfortably interact with each other, and beats get spent reloading anyway, which reduces the amount of time that I can spend reaching the exit. There are a number of hidden rooms indicated by these icons on the floor found underneath cracked bricks. The Shriner Room and the Battle Shop I think are the most rewarding, but also the most dangerous. In the Shriner Room, I can pick one of 3 shrines that'll give something in a trade-off. For instance, the Shrine of Peace will give me an additional heart and heal me, but turns whatever weapon I'm holding into a dagger. This detriment can be mitigated with a throwable weapon or junk weapon that's somewhere in the level, but not all shrines can be circumvented like this. Shrines can also be bombed for items, and what drops depends on if they've been interacted with or not. In the Shriner room, if a shrine isn't touched and instead bombed, one of each dragon spawns and the player has to kill them, but surviving means you get whatever dropped. The full list of shrines is on the wiki and the link is in the description, but some shrines become more important than others, and I had this chart on another screen to tell me what I should do and what I'll get. If it wasn't on my list, I ignored it. And the battle shop gives the player one of 3 items to pick from, but once you pick up the item, you're locked in with 2 mini bosses and 2 enemies, and you can't leave until everything dies. If there's an item that you want and you're playing anybody except Dove, Bard, Arya, or Coda, you can actually kill the floor's mini boss and then wait until the end of the song, grab an item on the last beat, and then fall to the next floor with a 5-finger discount. I made it a point to collect as many hearts as possible, and this can be done through eating magic food while at full health, bombing the sacrifice shrine, buying a heart from purple rune rooms or the shopkeeper, or getting a ring of peace. More hearts means more chances to survive any mistakes made, and finding them early guarantees farther and longer runs, especially when you take armor into account. On the topic of hearts, eating food turns cursed hearts into real hearts if all of your real hearts are full. So in the instance of cookies, each cookie, which would normally heal for half a heart, will heal a full cursed heart into a real heart. If you don't do that, then cursed heart containers will go away once you take damage that would destroy them. I eventually start the habit of opening doors and then stepping away. At worst, this costs me nothing. At best, it saves me from a painful hug. I don't feel down if I retreat for a few extra beats to gather confidence, because eventually I do learn to read tiles and count quicker. And speaking of tile counting, bats. I started looking at tiles as even or odd. If there's one tile between me and a bat that moves every beat like the red or black bats, that means that we're both even, which is bad. 1 beat offset will put us in an alternating pattern right next to each other, meaning that I'll never get hit by this bat again as long as I don't dig again or interact with another enemy or an item. This tile counting also helps with enemies that move every other beat that are in later zones. And finally, an attack pattern that you should familiarize yourself with is pinning. Enemies like the leprechaun, banshees, monkeys, gorgons, and devils get knocked back when they get hit, and pinning them against a wall is both beneficial and hot as fuck. Now that those hints are all done, and I'm sure there won't be any more the rest of this video, back to the game! The rest of the game takes place with All Zones mode, where all 5 zones have to be completed back to back. The next 2 achievements are basically the same thing. So Hardcore is doing an All Zones mode with Cadence, but Carpe Diem is also an All Zones mode with Cadence. The only difference is that Daily Challenge is a seeded run, meaning everyone playing the game that day has the same randomization, but if you die, you can't attempt it again until the next day when there's a new global seed. I die in my first Daily Challenge attempt, but on the following day, I get the Heartthrob achievement and then send this blue motherfucker to the Shadow Realm for Carpe Diem. It may have taken me 229 deaths to beat all 5 zones separately, but combined, I only died once. While working on So Hardcore, I get my first
flawless victory
boss fight. Not getting hit or dropping a beat in a boss fight lets the player pick a chest to get a free item. Black chests give a random weapon, armor, or footwear. Purple chests give spells, scrolls, or rings, and the red chest gives everything else. I prefer picking the purple chest overall as it's my favorite color, and also odds are I'm not going to have a spell or ring by the time I get here, and almost anything in this chest would be an upgrade. For the black chest, there are 9 armors, 9 feeties, and over 90 weapon combinations, so if you're missing armor or boots, you are not getting what you want. The red chest is pretty much everything else, so you might get a torch, charm, shovel, expired produce, hair wrapped between your toes that you can't seem to pull out, or 45 cents underneath your couch cushion. That's not to say it won't have important items in there, and having a headpiece like the monocle will show exactly what's in a given container, but if you don't know what's in there, I prefer not gambling. While grinding to see the NecroDancer again, I earn friendly fire by bombing one of the shrines in the Shriner room, and then I get the perfect run. An early Onyx bow let me 2-shot death metal, a monkey saved me from a bomb explosion, the Conjurer room gets me my first heavy plate, and then the Onyx bow sends Dead Ringers straight into second phase, and then I bombed my way to phase 2 on the NecroDancer while Dorian mowed shit down with the crossbow, and I earned the So Hardcore achievement. The world is now my oyster, and I can play anyone except Coda and Arya. I picked Nocturna next. She starts with the cutlass, which slowly became one of my favorite weapons as it lets me parry attacks as long as I also attacked something that same beat. One of her spells is transforming into bat form, which you can either manually enter or automatically enter if she takes lethal damage as a sort of oh shit mechanic. This form can see all enemies, deals 4 damage, and every 5 kills heals half a heart. The downside is none of her items are taken into account, and it costs half a heart to go back to Nocturna's person form. Actually, wait, there's another upside to her, and it's that her bat form can't dig since it even ignores your shovel. This may sound like a downside, but it doesn't drop a beat, which leads me into a tangent about something called dig buffering. At times, I may want to wait a beat for an enemy to do something, like with the aforementioned bats. This can be done by digging at a wall to take up a beat and therefore not move. This mechanic is why the miner's cap is great in theory, but I feel like it was an overall negative whenever I picked it up because it automatically digs. With Nocturna, you can keep buffering on the same tile repeatedly and never move as many beats as you want. Nocturna also has 2 final bosses. Frankensteinway gets a shield that can be removed by pressing the button associated with the glowing generator, or they can be destroyed instead. After killing him, it's time to fight the person who made Nocturna this way, the Conductor.
The Conductor, my B.
I know literally nothing about this point, so I flail and just get so absurdly lucky with the Crown of Thorns healing me at the same time that a bomb explodes, but you know what? Luck doesn't matter, because I earned that to the bone. Next I work on Melody, Eli, and Dorian. Melody's weapon is the golden lute, so she can't directly attack, and playing her helps with positioning and recognizing enemy movement patterns better. I try to relate her attack pattern to ripping off a band-aid, although waxing hair is probably more appropriate.
Right, I went the wrong way. I'm supposed to go this way. Ready?
Yeah.
Oh, mother!
We got it that time. That's a 10. That's a 10.
Eli was probably the biggest workout, as his only offense is more bombs. And you know how when you get tired, you get clumsy and make mistakes? Well, moving, then hopping to down left for every attack meant a full jump for every offensive move I wanted to do, and if you've ever played DDR, you know that strings of doubles are incredibly taxing.
Looking at you, dropout!
The Dove Familiar made bombing enemies from a specific direction quite frustrating. In fact, it actually made fucking everything frustrating. I hated the Dove Familiar. All it does is teleport the enemies away from where you're at to another part of the floor, but if you have to go to that part of the floor, you're just making it fucking worse for you. I hate this familiar. It was here that I used a throwaway run to get 8-ball with a Congo line, and I eventually got a second spell to finish out fully loaded. Dorian enforces skipping beats, as he has a permanent boots of leaping, and turning it off and taking a step does half a heart per movement. Standing still to have enemies come at you is ideal, and Dorian helps get rid of that need to always be on beat and potentially take damage, all for the sake of an arbitrary multiplier. Dorian wants you to know, it's okay to not be perfect. If the player doesn't have a bomb, some shops can't be exited until the song ends if you don't make the right movements. Dorian is also the best way to get the en passant achievement, which I do twice. Of these 3, Melody has the unique boss, the NecroDancer, again. While I won't go over the specifics of this fight, I will give you one super mega ultra important note. There is a reason the boss card is silent. Do not move until you're ready. His boss fight is timed, so as soon as the music begins, the clock is ticking. Melody's golden lute hides the fact that I still die so much to bats. Thankfully, not only is there a ring that makes dealing with them easier, but there's actually a charm that fulfills the same goal, which frees up a ring slot. When the player leaves a thick pile of gold and 7 turns pass without something disturbing the pile, a leprechaun will appear. He runs away until he takes damage, at which point he'll flip and chase the player instead. If he lands even 1 hit, you lose all of your gold and he vanishes. But killing him drops not only the gold he stole, but the lucky charm, which will make it so that bats won't attack you if there's a viable tile that they can go to instead. From here I do Bard as a palate cleanser before I get into more difficult things. With Bard, the music repeats infinitely, so I can take as long as I want.
I just play smart. I know, a dangerous thing to say out loud.
The Merchanticide achievement can be more easily done with tempo as he deals infinite damage, but I killed the shopkeeper with Bard for 2 reasons. The first one is I had max hearts and over 6 damage already, so I was decked out. But secondly, killing the shopkeeper drops the Crown of Greed, which doubles all gold picked up. Bard doesn't need to keep a beat, so my multiplier will always be max, meaning gold drops are at their absolute limit, and double the gold means I easily get the
I love gold.
achievement for having 6,000 gold at one time. I pivot to Reaper, which is, well, he's an achievement.
I've unlocked the stairs. Holy shit.
Then I Cleric Clear with Clarinetta. She teaches the player to think an extra move ahead, and this is because she deals damage via her sword's tip, which will swing in whichever direction you do pairs of inputs.
You know, if you move that fast enough, you can almost write your name.
This results in doing drive-bys on lines of enemies and some dizzying shenanigans with Coral Rift. The Smite Master achievement can be earned by clearing out a chunk of Fortissimal's audience and then swinging at 4 skeletons. This could also be done with a conga line, but I prefer static targets. Here's where the first advanced tip comes in that players may still not be aware of, and that is that exits in most zones are somewhat static. Zone 1's exits will never be above or to the left of the player's spawn. Zone 2's exit is spoiled as soon as you spawn in. If the beginning paths are perpendicular, then the exit is towards the corner of the room. If the pathways are straight across, dig at a couple of walls, and if you see gray, it's the other way. Zone 3's exit can be hinted to the player with the following 2 words: get fucked. Zone 4's layout is a tic-tac-toe board. The player will spawn at one corner, and the exit will always be at the opposite end. After digging some walls to find out where I am, I move horizontally to reach the other side, and then move vertically to get to the exit. I never go vertical, then horizontal, because this fucking guy can be here. This also means that I can stop digging random walls. Don't dig random walls. Stop digging random walls. Don't do it! Fuck! Zone 5 allegedly has a way to hint at the exit, but I never caught on to it. But doorways can either be right or wrong. If the first door I open isn't the exit, it'll never be going further down this wrong way. I talk about exits because it's time for the first painful character. Dove is a pacifist, and so she doesn't actually kill enemies. Instead, her melee confuses them so she can make a break for it. The staircase to each floor is already open, and there are no zone bosses to fight. With decent headphones, the staircases can be heard opening when spawning into a floor for a sense of direction. Dove further reinforces that I don't need to kill everything I see. I've already left slimes behind and ignored dead-end rooms unless there's a good shrine in it, and thus I don't feel the need to kill everything and have songs run out, which is kind of important because if the song runs out for Dove, she dies of cowardice. Dove also teaches lighting's effect on aggro. If you've had a glass torch or circlet of telepathy, you may have noticed that enemies don't move until the player is in sight. Dove can confuse enemies, hide behind a wall, and the enemy won't move until they see her again. I use this to plug corridors and completely block off oopsie doodles like this one. Dove can dig out the 2 most common walls, and this can be useful to burrow around rooms rather than running through rooms, and this is just the best. I love tunneling around all secret-like. If I need to clear out a room, I make use of spike traps and bomb traps, as Dove's bombs don't kill, but instead they teleport enemies away. In one of my runs, I find the Fear Scroll in the first zone, which is the perfect time to get mostly harmless by hitting a green slime with Dove, which confuses it, and then using the Fear Scroll. Confusing a green slime, while feared, makes it attack. Dove's runs are solely RNG, and a run can start off perfectly, and the wrong floor layout later will just brick it. But a run could also see Dove get hit to 1 heart on the first floor, find the best items for survivability, and then turn the worst start in history into the Peace Out achievement. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the video game equivalent of eating spicy food because you like the taste, but you know how it's gonna feel in a few hours. Aria. Aria has one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard, made by Family Jewels, but it comes at the cost of being one of the most dreaded characters, as she only has half a heart, her only weapon is a dagger, and the player can't even miss a beat, which makes her one of the hardest characters to play. But it's kinda difficult to remember the bad parts of an Aria run when you just keep jamming out. Thankfully, the achievement Etude requires her to play on no beat mode, which makes this an incredibly fragile bard run. Here I also get the electric achievement, as Aria starts off in zone 5 and makes her way to zone 1, and this is easy to nab with 3 big skull spawns. But no beat mode Aria has revealed a new thing to pay attention to: counting damage. For some characters, needing 1 hit more or less than expected is the difference between dying and also dying. 1 wrong dig buffer, dead. Undercount your damage? Dead. Forget you one-shot an enemy? Believe it or not, dead. Aria also introduces the final character-specific boss, the Golden Loot, where the player needs to hit it 10 times while surviving spawns and dodging pig cannons. But now seems as good a time as any to go into a term that players should be getting familiar with: quick kills. Okay, technically two terms: quick kills and safe strats. Most bosses have ways to be killed as quickly as possible, and while some are doable on a dance pad, others I could never confidently do in every zone, but I can do safe strats. The quick kill for King Konga involves zooming up to the throne and either blowing it up or digging it up with a pickaxe. Depending on the zone that I find him in, killing him while dodging certain enemies and the conga line is a bit too dicey, but the safe strat is constant for every zone except 3. Entering the middle door, I need to ensure that I move up on the beat that the conga line comes down. This will always force the line to come to the middle laterally instead of doing this weird split off. There's a small chance that they'll get blocked by bats on the way, but the odds are pretty low. The reason Zone 3 is a problem is because of the coin flip that is the distance between conga lines. If the conga line is too far away, killing both elementals and then performing the same movements to bring the conga line in usually works. If the conga line is too close, the firehound here ruins the fight, and so I need to kill only the first elemental near me, then loop down into the left to kill the firehound, and then clear the conga lines as unimpressively as possible. The quick kill for Coral Riff involves freezing him in place if possible, or hitting him at the top with like a throwable weapon or something, and then dropping bombs at certain locations. I could probably do this, I just don't trust me around water. But as long as I'm not playing Arya, Coda, Eli, or Monk, I can actually just camp out in this corner and have enemies come to me, which makes even Dorian's boss clear pretty simple. For Deep Blues, the safe strat is to enter the left door and then head straight up. And the major pieces that need to die first are the knights and the queen. Whether or not a pawn blocks my attack, I kill the first piece in my way and then move down right, and then focus on the knights and the queen, and then kill everything else in my way, making sure to leave the left couple of columns alone until the end. The quick kill for Deep Blues is to throw a weapon at him, which will spawn him on your side, and then you can hurt him into the corner and bomb him. But this is kind of dangerous for Coda or Monk, as your thrown weapon may actually wind up sitting on some gold. Fortissimo can be overwhelming, but rather than spending bombs on the speakers, the safe strat uses his own audience against him. Now, if you were an inexperienced player, not pointing any fingers, you'd clear out his audience back to front and he'll see this hole and jump down off stage and immediately start phase 2. Instead, now I clear out the side enemies, then wait until he's on the other side of his stage, and then kill only the first skeleton in the front row and hide behind the audience. Once he drops down, his greedy first traversal wants to head straight to me, but he's blocked in. From here, I clear out the rest of the side enemies and make a little nook in the center of the audience. Then I line up on an even row to the mole, come out, and then lure him down, around, and into the trap that I've laid. Once I reach the stage, I come down and then circle around. Once I've lapped once, down once, circle around, repeat until he dies. Any ads that he spawns will be blocked by the audience. If I have a ton of damage or I know he's spamming slow enemies like devils, I don't even need to do the setup, but if I still only have like my starter weapon or like a dagger or something, then this is perfect. For both of Cadence's bosses, there are kinda sorta quick kills. For Dead Ringer, he'll forget whatever he's doing if he's on the same row or column as Cadence. So to abuse this, I enter the row that the doors are on and then go back and forth to find out what side of the arena he's on, then enter that doorway and distract him as fast as possible. I move to the side while he's charging and up a row so that after he impacts the wall and regains his senses, he'll come up, see me again, and charge straight at the bell, destroying it and not spawning a mini-boss. While he's charging, I move around him and then get back onto the same row so that when he wakes up again, he charges immediately at the second bell. I do this prep again on the nearest column and then trick him into charging onto the same row again. That's 4 bells, no mini bosses, and from here he just needs to be led to the center of the arena and then ping-ponged until he hits the gong. NecroDancer's phase 1 involves pressing these switches, which drop bombs onto the stage and blow open chunks of it. Wait, bombs?
Balls, 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 balls.
And hey look, it's phase 2. Melody's NecroDancer 2, I've only got one hint for. I can get an early hit in by entering the middle door, then moving up to row 3, left 1, and then skip a beat. This makes him come to me on that beat rather than running away from me, which is better than chasing him into a corner that'll then make him teleport across the arena. Arya's golden loot has a perfect set of movements, assuming the sarcophagi don't spawn knights below them at the start, and also assuming the red dragon doesn't spawn on this row, moving upward. If the red dragon spawns in this way, and there is no way to mitigate damage, the run is kinda boned. Thankfully, there are so many random elements that the odds of this happening are surprisingly low. I prayed to RNG gods that if I ever saw one or both combinations of bad luck in a practice run, I'd never see it on a real run, and surprisingly enough, that's exactly what happened. But anyway, if the initial setup doesn't have the knights in this bad location, then the proper movement is coming up to row 4, then down up twice, and then moving up to meet the loot. From here, I have to pay attention to where the head is, as it'll be in one of 3 locations, left, right, or up. Now, the way that I'm going to word this is in terms of directions, because technically what you're doing is you're either hitting the head or the body, but because you're getting confused so much, it's better to just recognize that, hey, you only have to focus on the head, all of the other movements are static. So the overall movements are head, up, head, down, down, head, down, head, down, down, head, down, up, head, and then just keep going up to the exit. And finally, the boss that lived in my head rent-free for weeks, death metal. He bothered me so bad, I literally got jolted awake at 5:24 a.m. one Wednesday morning by my subconscious in a dream telling me that I was a fucking idiot. And then it laid out a bunch of gibberish that I somehow understood in my half-awake state, and I ended up pointing at my roof, drawing out what I was seeing, and then I realized my brain is a lot wetter than I thought, because it actually gave me the low percent solution to death metal. You see, death metal always spawns on the 5th row, so as long as I enter the same door that he's standing and I don't miss a beat, then I'm safe. If I'm on zones 1, 3, or 4, I have to clear out all enemies in the room before I start the trick, but if I'm in zones 2 or 5, I can ignore them and start it immediately. I need to move to a wall and then keep jumping back and forth. On the same turn that death metal walks into a tile that's touching the wall, I am leaving that square, at which point I need to hit him twice and then move up as he follows behind me. From here, I drop a bomb and then hit him once, then run away from the bomb. This third hit will take off the shield and nudge him to the side, but he'll still get hit by the bomb, which in total that drops him down to 2 hearts, which skips his summoning phase entirely, which is the worst part of this fight on any zone. Next up is Randomizer Mode with Nocturna. Randomizer Mode is its own achievement and also counts towards Mode Master. In Randomizer Mode, all enemies have random health, damage, beats per movement, whether they fly or they phase through walls, their movement patterns, and most importantly, gold drops. This makes it a simply fabulous mode to get 8,000 gold with Nocturna for the Golden Loot achievement. It only took, I'm sure you noticed all my examples were all from just Zone 1, so let's not talk about it. Diamond is another palette cleanser of a character. This is basically Cadence, but he can move diagonally. I find the pawnbroker in Zone 4, and remembering that I had sold my chest piece a while back, I sell everything I have to throw a run for the Sunk Cost achievement. Diamond's diagonal mobility means clever traversals and skillful kills being displayed to earn a cut above. Another achievement that can be earned with Diamond is Fool's Mate. This requires killing the king on deep blues without damaging anything. Not killing, damaging. So throwing a dagger on Zone 5 deep blues still hits a pawn. Doesn't count. This is most easily done using no beat mode to plan everything out and then re-entering all zones until deep blues is a boss, then ensuring that only the king dies. Freeze familiar, freeze spells, or freeze scrolls help make this easy peasy. This was a ton of work, a ton of information, but numerically it's more than half of the possible achievements for Crypt in a little over 50 hours. But I hate to break it to you, this was all training and thus it was the beginner difficulty stuff. It's time for intermediate. Phasing mode is where a haunting performance is earned, which lets the player walk through walls instead of digging, and it was here that I found the reflect shield in Zone 5, which meant that I could also earn destructive interference by killing Deadringer with his own attack. I then wanted to do a bit of practice getting Speed Demon, and here's where I start to notice that my prioritization has massively improved. I'm no longer focusing on the first enemy that I see, and instead focus on enemies that move more frequently than others. It's no longer the biggest scary enemies, but it's the faster, threatening enemies that I'm looking for. I'll lure faster enemies around slower enemies, or I'll send the Minotaur off to Narnia so I can clear out his buddies. Map awareness is something that needs to be priority one, as just like with DDR, you can't just sight read what's coming at you, because then if you're surprised, you can't pivot correctly and, I don't know, stub a toe. Players typically start off playing Crypt by focusing on one enemy while not looking at something else directly in front of them, which is kind of like watching only the gray arrows. Eventually, players need to look further down the line so they can see what's coming in order to prepare. I did say it was practice though, so I didn't actually get the achievement, but I complete Mystery Mode with Bard just so I can feel something. This mode hides all enemies and items, and not even the monocle is safe from its wrath. At this point, I was hitting my stride and meeting other players and joining the Crypt Discord. If you stream this game, you'll end up gaining a number of viewers that are a part of the tight-knit Crypt community, all of whom would be more than willing to assist with earning a couple of achievements. The most coordination necessary is for Family Trip, which requires a 4-player run with Cadence, her dad Dorian, her mom Melody, and her grandmother Aria, but fuck you, Uncle Eli! And I do this with 3 other lovely people, Ribs Chirino, Niramidas, and the Exterminator.
Playing with a dance pad, dude. You're
Yeah,
fucking crazy.
But I mean, he did say that this game was meant for a DDR pad. So if anything, Flipsy has a better advantage than us.
It was designed with a DDR pad in mind. Is it better for a DDR pad? Nah.
In multiplayer runs, the game follows the beat of whoever is closest to an enemy, and so the 4 of us came up with a plan to have Aria go first, as Ribs was the most experienced person out of the 4 of us.
Very
Loot
good.
this guy. Loot this guy, so let me clean up. Fuck me. Okay, now we got you.
Next up, it was a toss-up between Neri on Dorian, me dancing around and doing my own thing, and Nate goes off and gets himself killed because he was the newest one to the game out of all of us.
This little dude here.
Yeah, he ain't dead yet.
We have Axe.
Should I try to kill Nate? Survive a hit?
Oh my
Go to
god!
Ribs. Good catch.
Thank you.
Because there are multiple players, the items needed to be divvied up, and to help alleviate some of the stress here, some characters have forcible restrictions. Aria and Melody can't pick up weapons, Melody can't gain more damage, Dorian can't pick up boots or armor, and Aria can't increase her health. This involved us putting some safe items onto Nate, like the Ring of Peace and, most humorously, the Monocle. And I say most humorously because he called out a blue ring during the run, and everybody was like, oh shit, a Ring of Mana, we can get big spells, put that on Flipsy. But, yeah, don't blindly pick up every item you see.
Wait, it's Shadow as fuck.
Oh, it's Shadows, lol.
Oh no.
I'll clear top.
Oh!
You did a great job
can't-
clearing
I
top.
forgot
let
to-
me tell you.
Oh, it's Cell Shop.
Cell shop. Ooh. Wait, I can
I gotta-
sell the ring.
Yeah, you can see the ring.
I picked up a bomb.
Oh my god,
I'm
I
gonna
can
get this
see.
one here.
I can fight!
Okay, I'm gonna kill him and let you know.
Okay.
Wait there. I fucked up, wait.
Because we're doing all zones run with all of these characters, we end up fighting Dead Ringer, which is kind of fucking weird because Dorian's in the party, the NecroDancer, and the Golden Loot.
Oh, I
Watch out
fucked
for the pig cannons. Pig cannons.
I got confused. Ah, I'm sorry, guys.
It's all good.
I hit it.
Fine,
Go hit
it's
him, go
fine.
hit him. Multiply, go hit him. Let's go.
Oh god damn it.
Let's go. It's good. Go up. Go up.
Oh, okay, we got it.
Just go up.
I am confused.
It's a good thing I practiced the golden loot, huh?
I then get 2 Cantango with a different victim, Valora.
You almost ran me over.
You'll be fine.
Rude.
And she helps me get Ghost in the Pot, which can be done by restarting Zone 4 until you find an urn, and then possessing a teleport mage using Haunter, and then having the urn pushed into me. Since teleport mages swap places with whatever kills them, I am now to Ghost into urn. I continue playing with Haunter to earn Ashante and Doppelganger, and this also lets me learn more about the enemies that I'm constantly fighting. Specifically, it gave me insight into the mages, but also the dragons.
Nothing like a dragon with a bow, you know?
And this leads me into another major step in my growth as a young Flipsy playing Dance Dance Revolution. With a tip so groundbreaking, it not only turned my legs into a blur in the arcades, but it had a direct, impactful application to Crypt of the NecroDancer. In Dance Dance Revolution, recognizing certain arrow patterns lets the player tell their body well in advance to be ready to do some kind of motion. Unless it's a very specific scenario, DDR wants to keep the player always facing the screen, and so rarely will players see arrow patterns like this, which, if taken literally with one foot after the other, would spin you around. There are noticeable patterns that you start to recognize, such as slopes to walk across the dance pad, crossovers like in Exotic Ethnic or Rhythm and Police, and even doubles that spin you around like in Afro Nova or Maximizer. This allows the player to stop looking at this much of the screen at a time and look at this much of the screen at a time, allowing you to see entire chunks of arrow patterns and prepare accordingly. What if I told you that those arrow patterns have existed in Crypt the entire time? Are you kiting dragons or nightmares? Left, right, up, down, up, down. Is there a long, dark pathway without lighting or torches? Well, alternating trios are there for you. Having trouble dealing with purple mushrooms? Alternating trios are here for an encore performance. Do you hate fighting green devils or the leprechaun? You can help them cross over. But perhaps my favorite that everyone should learn is the dragon dance. In most occasions, players will encounter dragons and think two things: either kite them back, or oh fuck me, it's time to die. If you're in a tight, enclosed space and the nearby hallway hasn't been cleared, or you've been ambushed by a blue or red dragon, you may think the jig is up. In DDR, there is a fan arrow pattern, and this arrow pattern helps players lock down a dragon into as small as a 2x2 square. Shout out to Elad Difficult for their tutorial videos, which helped me visualize this a lot better. This man was so helpful during my streams. Go check out his YouTube for more in-depth Crypt videos on how to best kill most enemies in the game. And this is where my journey starts to get spicy. I put in a channel point redeem to test my skills with Aria, an actual Aria run.
Hey, you wanna get fucked up?
Well, hey, someone redeemed it. These updates were sprinkled throughout my streams as I attempted Nocturna hard mode next, which makes every floor have a near indestructible sarcophagus spawning enemies constantly, and it also forces 2 mini-bosses to spawn on every floor. Every floor. Every floor. Hard act to follow probably resulted in the longest runs of any character, as the constant flow of enemies forced backtracking, and trying to keep my ass alive and safe from all the extra mini-bosses made that retreating incredibly frequent. Thankfully, my biggest roadblocks were poor health, inconsistent damage values, and next to no defense when I made it to Zone 3. So in the run where I got it, an Obsidian Cutlass, damage boots, Ring of Healing to get a heart back every floor, with a shield spell for good measure, there was no way this wasn't happening. So now I'm stupidly thinking, hey, Bolt has a spear instead of a dagger. This would be a good cool-off character. Yeah, Bolt moves at double tempo and is 1/3 of the Gate Guardian. I mean Coda. And while Eli was eventually a workout, Bolt made me sweat on the first fucking floor, and my shins and calves felt the burn as I had to pause every single staircase I took. For a breather, I took Bolt into the extra double tempo mode to earn tachyarrhythmia clearing Zone 1, which looks like this, but you can hold down the directional buttons rather than press each beat.
But then it's back to the rest of the zones.
Another DDR adjacent movement that I found thanks to Bolt was galloping. The beats for Crypt are quite forgiving, letting players be a little bit early or a little bit late, and then you can compensate on later beats without being punished. In DDR, there are offset beats like in Rhythm and Police or Matsuri Japan, where instead of dancing around, you end up skipping or galloping. These gallops can be applied to a number of songs, including most of Zone 2, some of Zone 3, and even some bosses like Deep Blues' bassline. Here, have a listen. Although Although Bolt is fast and you're used to keeping a beat, at this point, I'm not too worried about it, and therefore I was pretty calm. But after getting all these items, forget about getting hype.
I am the hype!
Hey, you want to get fucked up?
Next up is Suzu, who is friggin' terrifying. And I will admit, the run where I earned Suzuper was hella lucky, as I got both the Ring of Piercing and the Ring of Wonder. RNGesus be with you. When Suzu kills an enemy, she zooms off in the direction of the attack until she hits a wall or a shielded enemy and kills anything in her way. And sometimes, I think I'm in the way.
That was scary. Hit. I'm stuck.
Charging into the wrong wall lets red dragons get free snipes, and charging into armored enemies will just box me in. The Ring of Piercing makes it so her dash can't be blocked at all, so she can't get trapped as easily. Suzu reinforces the need to zoom the map out, or look really far ahead of where you're at, but not even this can save me from what becomes my mortal enemy on the channel, monkeys.
Oh. A monkey got me again! Oh no, I'm dead. Because of the monkey. You guys noticing a trend?
If Suzu hits arrow traps, she gets turned around, and this makes earning her Pandemonium achievement so insanely difficult that I put this achievement on the back burner for later. During this grind, I do find my third green bat for Bat Trick, but in the 300 hours I played this game, I ran into like 14 green bats. RNGesus be with you. Keeps on Ticking, Speed Demon, and Like a Bat Out of Hell are very similar to each other. All three of these achievements benefit from weapons like tridents and warhammers along with the Ring of Piercing, and they make use of optimized routes across floors, minimal use of shops, and taking excessive amounts of trapdoors.
Trident, please. Thanks. I'll take the trident instead of that. Mail, I'm going to get the mail.
Where they differ is with Tempo, who has enemies from all zones on each floor, but at least has infinite damage and wall hacks. Tempo specifically teaches players to optimize their routes and only shop if necessary, because if he doesn't eat food, pick up a new item, or kill something in 16 beats, he just explodes. Not even the potion can save him. This makes him and Dove the most RNG dependent characters in the game. RNGesus be with you. But at least his Sweet Tooth makes cookies his best defense, as each cookie resets the counter. Logically, the more that you move, the more likely you are to die to Tempo's curse. So to move as little as possible, I can take breaks on the first floor of each zone, then fall through and clear out the second floor, then don't move again on the third floor so that I can drop down and kill the zone boss, and then just repeat for every zone. Also, another thing that these three achievements have in common is they tell me that the shove shield is ass.
There's no fucking way I'm gonna live through this, right?
And at the 100th hour, I attempt Monk. His unique characteristic is the Vow of Poverty, which kills him if he touches any gold. And for most players, this ruins so many runs because of the bad habits they built up, such as killing everything and grabbing all the gold that they see. Cadence and Nocturna's speedruns fully re-emphasized the need to only kill what was threatening, and this helped make my first attempt of Monk such a fucking success. God damn, I am so sick. I had earth and bombs to blow up gold, and I didn't need any of that shit. Your boy is trained. I bet you thought this section was gonna be longer, but let's move it the fuck along.
Who needs 10 cadences when you one-tap the monk?
With Condor, which is the Crypt of the NecroDancer online racing event, coming to a close at about the same time that I was entering the back half of my time spent playing Crypt, I was getting frequent visits from more solid Crypt members like Yuka34, Focusing Face, Winterbit, and Spooty Biscuit, who are amazing Crypt players alongside Ribs Chirino, and any random questions I had, they were happy to answer and give feedback. But from here, most of my efforts now were making sure the hundreds of micro tips I'd gleaned from my 1,000 deaths thus far were put into practice. The only other thing I attempt to do is complete one bolt run a day off stream before I would start. This helped me tremendously with reading rooms faster, as I need to get used to reacting quicker with Bolt, so that when I run into the same kind of room with a normal character, I've got better reactions.
Hey, you wanna get fucked up?
Ah! What? Hit. Wow! Why? Why? What was I thinking?
That being said, I hop back to Cadence to do No Return Mode, its own achievement that also counts towards Mode Master. And for a refresher, this is what we've got left on that compilation achievement. In No Return Mode, Cadence can't go back to the tile that she was on the previous beat, and if she does, she takes half a heart of damage. This forces a complete reprogramming of what players do of dancing back and forth, which is difficult to get used to, but thankfully the amount of play that I've done helps me come up with alternatives to hopping back and forth, such as dig buffering. Weapons like the axe and rapier prove to be problematic, as the common move when attacking with these weapons is to go back to the tile I just came from, and that would kinda sorta kill me. The Ring of Peace, removing the red and blue dragons, was what made frequently reaching the NecroDancer possible, as the red dragon's fireball would doubly punish me if I needed to retreat, but honestly I just needed a large amount of hearts and a potion to put the NecroDancer down yet again, while focusing all my protective brain power on keeping Dorian alive, as he is also affected by a no return square.
Hey, look at that speedrun leaderboards, number 3. I'm number 3. Because no one wants to do no return mode. No return mode sucks and I hate it. I never want to do it again. Go away.
My eyes were now set on Ensemble mode for Polyphonic. This mode has the player choose a different character for each floor and boss, with a couple of the characters repeating, namely Aria, Cadence, and Melody. I logic out what I think are some incredibly safe picks. For the first zone, I had Mary as the first floor, because I'd never played her before. Haunter was 2, Dorian was 3, as I was uncomfortable with the both of these characters as well, and the first zone boss was Aria. Dove, Suzu, Monk, and Eli slaughtered their way through Zone 2, as the enemies in these zones were pretty easy to kill or avoid, and Zone 2's boss, no matter who it is, can still be killed with one bomb. Zone 3 was cleared out by Tempo, Cadence, Melody, and Clarinetta. The only worrisome character in this entire lineup was Tempo, but the worst part about Tempo is actually just Zone 1, and with the abundance of enemies on any floor in Zone 3, Tempo's curse almost never goes off. Zone 4 is pretty well segmented, so I took Bolt, Diamond, and Reaper there with Melody's second use to clear the boss. This left Zone 5 to Aria and Cadence's second attempts, Nocturna, and then to round off the boss, Bard. Yeah, I know, Aria this late into the game is kinda scary, but I'd already done a ton of Aria updates at this point, and so I knew 5-1 like the back of my hand.
Hold up, because that was 5-4. You're gonna put on the sunglasses. Hell yeah.
Okay. Now with Ensemble mode done, I go into Deathless mode with Cadence once more to earn Undeadly. This requires doing Deathless mode 10 times in a row with Cadence. With all I've learned thus far, dying is just a matter of me being greedy, impatient, complacent, or forgetting about monkeys, as I should know all there is to beat this game safely. But seeing the same gameplay through 10 times in a row does cause you to get a bit too overconfident sometimes. Thankfully, with all the stuff that I've learned, I found that early hearts, early damage, and I even took the glass armor in a couple of instances from Zone 1 to Zone 4, and this led to a solid clear. Oh, I guess it's time to...
Hey, you wanna get fucked up?
Oh, thank God. Okay, while I'm here stalling, these Aria updates actually started to show a couple of interesting things, both good and bad. The good, I was figuring out some enemy patterns for Arya while at 1 damage, and I decided to work towards only collecting up survivability or mobility for her and keep my damage value at 1. This way I don't accidentally overkill an enemy or overestimate my damage and ruin a run. The things I was learning about the enemies themselves was counting ooze golems as either being a 2-hit or a 4-hit, depending on where in their movement pattern I deal the first hit. I would also meet red and pink mages as well as the liches to get a kill off before they could attack, and the gold mages were 1 extra hit, then circling around to do another 2 hits like their red counterpart. White and yellow skulls were the same thing when it came to attacks, but the black skulls need 1 hit to activate the split, and then a step back before dealing the same 2 hits as the yellow skulls, as the skeletons that come from skulls are spawned in ready to party. If a skeleton could lose its head, I'd do it so that I could reduce screen clutter, as they were now no longer a threat. With the same traversal of Zone 4 happening all the time, the mommy was being attacked from above or below, so her pattern was always non-threatening at best, and down, up, left, up repeating at worst. The bad. If I could reach it, Family Jewels' music on Zone 3 specifically is terrible for gameplay. I had no idea where the beat was, and waiting for the music to actually start, I was already on a time crunch, and I did not like this new development as I loved Zone 4 and Zone 5's music so much. I didn't want to get rid of it. But the other problem was I was dropping beats, but I had no idea why.
What beat did I miss? Where did the beat go?
Sneezed on the beat and the beat got sicker.
I started putting anti-micro on my screen to monitor button presses, and then I could go back into the VODs later to see if my pad was acting up and I was double pressing, but unfortunately, no such luck. This was affecting my runs so much that it's now no longer actually time to stall. It's time for the absolute worst character in the game, and possibly in history, Mary and her worthless sheep Marv. Mary is just... Rather than just defending herself, she's also escorting her sheep, Marv. If Marv takes even 1 hit, if the wind blows in the wrong direction and he stubs a toe, he disappears and Mary starts to take damage every beat unless she can reach a trapdoor or the stairs. If she makes it to the next floor, Marv reappears and the player can breathe easy, but I feel like this implies that Marv took a hit and Mary just scooped him up and put him underneath her outfit to smuggle him out or something, then she died of over-encumbrance, which is the second dumbest shit in gaming, right behind whoever looked at an escort mission from any game in history and thought it'd be so fun to make an entire playthrough of a game 1 big escort mission. Let's fucking do it! I hope whoever designed Mary never again has matching socks. The fact that Marv respawns after you reach the next floor means that the limitation itself is arbitrary and incredibly punishing. To make matters worse, the potion, which players may find incredibly helpful for making up a mistake when you play Arya, but doesn't help with instant deaths like Monk's Vow of Poverty or Tempo's Curse, only refills Mary's health so she can move another 4 beats. 99% of Mary deaths are because there is no logic to Mary taking 20% of her health per beat and giving players the semblance of a chance in making it out alive with all the things that I've already stated. The odds of a staircase being opened by the time Marv gets hit on a floor is nearly non-existent, and if Marv takes a hit before the staircase is unlocked, there's not enough beats for Mary to kill the boss and escape. Just kill the fucking character, or make her make sense. But to make her be a hemorrhage for an illogical reason makes her one of the absolute worst designed characters in any video game. I hope whoever designed Mary has to use login credentials every time they access something that requires an account. Nothing will ever remember their info again, including password managers. Mary also completely rewrites everything that the player has learned thus far. Marv doesn't get hit by evil eye dashes unless she's standing directly next to it. Explosions from mushrooms, yetis, and metronomes don't hurt Marv, but the same exact splash attacks from Coral Riff and Fortissimo do. Speaking of Coral Riff, the tentacles don't attack Marv. Why do I have to have a bunch of lists and fucking yarn over a corkboard to determine the differences between the same exact style of attack? Because the design of Mary is half-assed, and I hope whoever designed her always has hot meals with cold centers. Speaking of enemy attacks and movement patterns, if the player puts themselves into harm's way to save Marv in Zone 3 when it comes to the fire or ice slimes, there's literally no way to survive. No other character in the game locks the player into a guaranteed death like this, and I hope whoever designed Mary catches every red light from now until the end of time. By the way, did you like any weapons or items that give a dash? Well, time to put those fuckers down because that jump forward needs to be taken into account and will most likely kill Marv, forcing players out of a specific, yet offered, item set. I hope whoever designed Mary steps on a Lego randomly once a day with the arch of their foot, regardless of their footwear. Even if they wear shoes 24/7, I want that Lego to apparate inside of the shoe. Hey, did you like the cutlass? Well, the knockback will most likely get you killed, and I hope whoever designed Mary is never able to skip ads unless the video they're watching is necessary to save someone's life. Bomb planting even has to be recalculated, and you know what? I hope whoever designed Mary has to make one extra trip from the car after grocery shopping. Hallway traversal also had to be changed because the red dragon will take a shot at Mary and she either needs to sit on Marv and eat the shot, or Marv gets barbecued, which I honestly do agree in this case should kill him, but the logic still doesn't make sense that I have to do something entirely different from every other character in the game, and I hope whoever designed Mary never has a cold side of the pillow. But if for some reason they actually like warm pillows, then I hope their pillow is always slightly moist. That dragon dance that was useful for every other character, yeah, no, Mary can't use the fan technique. Mary actually has to use a different dragon dance, which is just an extension of fighting Fortissimo's safe strat, but that's the worst thing about her. She doesn't even teach you a better version of killing any other enemy. All encounters have to be done differently and less optimized than other characters. This would make sense if she were an earlier character to play, as typically players, as they are learning the game, start from the worst way to deal with enemies and then get better without handicaps. But if Mary were one of the first 3 characters Crypt offered, no one would play this game because she is so catastrophically awful, and I hope whoever designed her has tinnitus, but instead of it going eee, it's a random SpongeBob laugh. Even something as simple as opening doors needs to be changed across the board, and I hope whoever designed Mary never has a chair that has legs that are all equal length. The only thing that Mary enforces is that eating food grants iframes, but this is something that players should have learned from other characters by now. This is basically a necessity because certain room traversals and enemy patterns force the player to put Mary on top of Marv and eat damage for the sake of the one-shot pinata of shit, rather than evading the enemies and funneling them into a safer spot to fight back. And I hope whoever designed Mary presses the wrong floor button every time they use an elevator. In the run where I actually succeed, I get positively greedy with a glass warhammer, later turning it into an obsidian one for safety, but an early ring of piercing does create the most heavenly of duos, as the warhammer plus a ring of piercing is arguably better than sex. This lets me clear blind spot corners and basically kill anything in 1 to 2 hits, but what this does not cover for is a new player's inability to remember spells. But do you remember how I said try to use spells once per floor so that you remember that you have them? The freeze spell helps me secure I love you, but I do not love Mary. I hope whoever designed Mary goes up or down staircases expecting there to be 1 step more or less than there actually is. I hope whoever designed Mary has an abundance of ketchup and mustard fluid come out before the actual condiment, regardless of the container that they use to procure it. I hope whoever designed Mary always experiences opposite carbonated liquids. May their sodas be flat and their soup broth and milk be bubbly. Remember that forced choice game back in the day, Fuck, Marry, Kill? Yeah, just remove 5 letters from that title. Fuck Mary. Okay, now that that's out of the way, the final non-main character that is still in my way is Suzu and her Pandemonium speedrun achievement. Oddly enough, between her speedruns and the Aria updates that I was getting redeemed, I started to notice the pattern with my dance pad again, and so I investigated further, and 2 things came out of this thanks to Suzu. For some reason, my version of Family Jewels' Zone 4, which is possibly my favorite version of Zone 4's music, had off-sync beat bars. Once the intro's done and the music drops, for some reason, my BPM was changing on me and I didn't realize it because I wasn't watching the bars. But the other thing that came out of this was Anti-Micro was finally fighting with the game enough that that was what was killing me. In my final nod to Dance Dance Revolution for this video, the scoring system of the game is based on your accuracy when the arrows are pressed, timed to when the arrows meet their gray counterpart. If you press an arrow drastically earlier or later than expected, you get an almost or a bad rating. Remember the forgiveness timing that I talked about that I was abusing primarily with Bolt? If you remember, that's being taken into account the whole time. The problem that I've pinned down can be visualized with these beat bars. Say that each pairing of color is the game's implemented safety range, crude estimation, not actual value. Once the colors overlap, no matter where they are, while they are overlapped, it is considered on beat for that beat. Meaning, if the two safe zones overlap on either end, it's considered good enough for that beat. Anti-micro and the game playing in tandem is a problem if I input a direction on one of the last frames of a safe beat, as anti-micro claims this valid input, but the game wants to claim this valid input too. This ends up causing the next real valid input to be these guys way out here, but because I think I'm doing an input for these ones closer together, and the game already called dibs on that one, that triggers the self-destruct sequence. This was further evidenced during my family trip run, as while we were waiting for all the nerds to hop into lobby, my down was double tapping, which was canceling me out of the menu screen. So, at this point, I turned off anti-micro and tried to adapt to Crypt's expectations of what controller it thinks I have plugged in. Thankfully, I've got muscle memory at this point, so I know where things like throw and item and bomb are, cause I don't play Xbox, so I don't know which one of these buttons is which. I reached the 75% mark of my journey, finally conquering Pandemonium. No, not that one, the Suzu achievement. Zooming the camera out to 1.5x overall did help me see things, but getting used to either following through with a movement or doubling back kept me alive even if it sent me backwards. Otherwise... Oh yeah, I shouldn't open doors that I'm not ready for either, and I'm not sure why I did that a few times. Because of the fact that the player has to go vroom full speed ahead, deaths were obviously encountered that could have been prevented if I weren't on a time crunch. Suzu not getting early damage in like the first zone does make runs very difficult and risky, even with the Berserk-like follow-through. Thankfully, a solid start with a Ring of War and plate armor, along with a security potion, let me clear out those pesky early roadblocks, and sunglasses that I got later gave me enough confidence to keep following through with my attacks and moving. I didn't even give up when all of my hearts got turned into cursed hearts, and some lucky teleports and dashes got me out the door in under 12 minutes for my 53rd achievement. And thus begins the start of the expert level stuff. This final portion of my Crypt journey was a doozy. Every day began with golden loot practice, as my Aria runs were getting to zone 3 decently enough, but that damn music was just so awful that it was the final nail in the coffin for me. Aria's Ascent was just too chaotic, so I swapped it out for Vert to more effectively hear the beats, thus being less likely to mess up my routine, my musical habit, my,
No! You threw off my groove!
I'm sorry, but you've thrown off the Emperor's groove.
The removal of anti-micro also turned out to be a pretty good solution as well, as I was no longer dying from randomly dropped beats, just of my own silly decisiveness. Except for this one. And this one. And this one. Did I screw up? No, it's the dance pad that's in the wrong. No, really, it is. My dance pad has 2 metal plates per button and an exposed wire is attached to one of them, and this sends a signal to my PC whenever a button is pressed and released when the 2 metal plates touch. When I slide my foot over lazily like this, I was actually making the metal pads touch just enough to rapidly trigger a signal, both pressing, depressing, and repressing all in the same motion. So I tried to make it a point to consciously not do that and ensure that I lift my foot and directly press on the pad. It still took a bit, but you know, it was the thought that counted. Some Flipsy lore for you as well. I get visitors from time to time that say they couldn't imagine doing what I was doing with their feet, and guys, I can't do this with my hands either. I made it to zone 4 once with my hands. Some people are just better at games on controller, some are better on keyboard and mouse, and at least one person we know of is better at stomping. So now my mistakes were narrowed down to temporary bouts of tunnel vision and hesitating. I heard some words of wisdom in another game that hesitation is the feat, and I feel like I was misunderstanding the words, but that sure was getting me killed with Aria now. The major thing that Aria runs need is a doctor because it's all about patience. Knowing where the exits are now, it is highly unlikely that Aria will die before a song ends, so methodically and slowly moving towards the exit, knowing in which direction it is, aside from zone 3, means I have all the time in the world. Mistakes were all me, and no amount of armor or damage would prevent me from doing what was killing my runs already, so I decided to hold strong and go for a low % run of Aria.
Why? I don't know. I have a clearly defined mental problem.
Swapping out the music to vert got me to zone 4 consistently. And then I saw zone 3. And then I saw zone 2. And then I saw zone 1. And then it was zone 5 again. But this was still good news. King Konga was now my worst boss, so seeing him in the first zone was always a good sign for me. My greed in trying to kill a goblin sentry was probably one of my most embarrassing losses of a potion, as I should have known better.
We're hitting zone 3. 4 out of 5 times. I've got better success rate than toothpastes have with your dentist.
3 fast floors and an easy fortissimo sealed zone 3. Zone 2 had the potion room, and you have no idea how much I was itching to grab it this far into a run, but I chose to keep trucking. The night before this was when I had that dream about Death Metal's quick kill, so it seemed only fitting that I would use this newly acquired knowledge to get me to zone 1, and all my golden loot practice helped me confirm my first Aria kill and also earning me the incredibly difficult flawless victory at the same time. Next up, the final part of Mode Master is earning Storybook Ending, which requires a back-to-back run of Nocturna, Cadence, Melody, and finally Aria. Suffice it to say, the first 3 were pretty much guaranteed victories, and so the worst part about getting this achievement was having to go through an hour and a half at a time, only to die to an Aria mistake. But since I did the aforementioned fantastic feat formerly featured, I forgot to fear picking up items. That doesn't stop me from doing something kind of stupid, but of course after a few more deaths, I reached the golden loot without losing my initial potion, and I had a scroll of need as a backup plan when I earned numbers 56 and 57, putting me at the achievement equivalent of the 4 horsemen. As I'm sure a few people have expected, this is where my journey ends. For now. The final 4 achievements require clearing back-to-back runs of the original 9 characters, back-to-back runs of the original 9 characters plus 4 from Amplified, the original 9 without picking up an item and keeping your runs low percent, and then of course, Coda. Coda was locked behind Polyamorous, which was the 9 character run, but I wanted to clear out Very Polyamorous next, as doing the 13 character run would actually grant me the 9 character run as well in another 2 for 1. Doing the 13 character run would also mean that I could close the chapter on the Amplified DLC, removing it, and while it would remove many helpful items and mechanics, it would also remove an entire zone from gameplay. The hardest characters for this run are Tempo and Dove because of their RNG related pain points, Mary because of the 4-legged pile of wool-covered trash, Aria because of the obvious need to be near perfect in movement, and Monk for his vow of poverty. I chose to do Tempo first in a majority of my runs, as his runs are most likely reset by Zone 1, so it was just a lot of going in and out until I got the right seed, and then it was either Mary, Monk, or Dove next. Monk and Dove were actually not terrible, and I can also reliably do Aria now, so I decided to do the 2 hardest ones first, Tempo into Mary, which leads us to the start of this video. This wombo combo was the death of me, and I hope whoever designed Mary has their credit card denied once every time they attempt to use it. I hope whoever designed Mary has an uncontrollable urge to drink a glass of orange juice after they brush their teeth. You know what? I hope whoever designed Mary can never load an image on their PC without it taking an extra 6 seconds. And now we've come full circle. I hope this was informative, and I hope you don't take away from this that I'm staying away from Crypt forever. I did say I want the 100%, and I meant it. Since I took a break from this game, I still relapse into Anti-Mary Rehab, but I've made it to number 3 on the Deathless Mary leaderboards, clearing through to this point 6 times back to back. Zone 2 is somehow my kryptonite. I'm sure I'll be back to Crypt soon, TM, but until then, be on the lookout for more videos. The next one is another fun, unorthodox rhythm game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video or on Twitch.
Every samurai has their own grenade. Nobody look at that.
Surprise, motherfucker.
At this point, I think it's just perseverance and stubbornness. Fuck! I stopped to read what you said. That's what I get for reading. And they told me I was supposed to get an education. Look where that got me, Mom.
I have already been cursed. Let me.
Yeah, let me get the guy with the red glowing eyes, the fangs, all blue claws. Evil guy cape like Arya, you dumb. I'll find some way to fuck this up so bad I'm gonna cry when I go to bed. I have a brain, but sometimes I don't fucking use it. Can't catch me, I've got all the damage inside of my trident, and it's gonna murder things.